The Fiat system is actually unethical, spiritually demonic.
We have this, an all-seeing eye floating on top of an unfinished pyramid. What does it tell us about who runs this world?
The bankers figured this out in medieval Europe, that you could loan out more money based on these infinitely imprinted notes than you actually had in your reserves. So it's a pretty wild scam. Usually what they do is they sort of capitalize on crises to further that agenda, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. But here's the thing, like even if they're not where they want to be in some of the areas, they are going to keep pushing. And the entire agenda of Bilderberg was the technocracy. And here you have the top, political and corporate class colluding together at semi-secret meetings saying, we want to bring all this technocracy in. They may be a little bit behind, but they're going to keep pushing. Actually, Bitcoin is spiritually correct, ethical money. That's why Bitcoin is a life raft out of this game rig system.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and today I'm very grateful to be joined by Jay Dyer. He's a philosopher, theologian, and longtime Bitcoiner who has spent decades studying power, culture, and the systems, both overt and occult, that shape our world. Jay, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to talk about Bitcoin. I don't get to do a lot of Bitcoin podcasts. I've probably done maybe 3 or 4. So I always like to do this because I get tired of talking about the same stuff over and over and over. So to branch out and talk about other interests is always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've done some amazing work looking at our culture, the occult backings of Hollywood, and how there's way more going on behind the scenes than we are meant to believe. So to hop into this conversation, I wanted to start with something that most people ignore. On the back of the $1 bill, we have this, right? An all-seeing eye floating on top of an unfinished pyramid. What does that symbol mean, being on our money, and what does it tell us about who runs this world?
That's a great question. That actually comes from a guy, if I'm going from memory, Henry Wallace, who was a socialist, sort of interested in esoteric subjects as well. And he believed that that would be the perfect symbol for the kind of new era that we would go into in terms of the progressivism of that time, that they thought that, FDR and the progressivism, the socialism that FDR represented could be this sort of gateway into a completely new world. And I think there are some esoteric components to that in terms of, the hermetic idea of completing the great work. So the unfinished pyramid in Hermeticism is the idea that eventually mankind will perfect through the secret societies and their teachings and their secret doctrines, the work of man and the work of perfecting nature. So that includes economic perfection, which ultimately for the socialists and people like that is this sort of utopian, imagined idea that we can achieve ultimate equality, ultimate fairness, egalitarianism, again, all sort of hermetic and Enlightenment era Freemasonic ideas, actually liberty, equality, fraternity. So I think the dollar having that on it represents what those people wanted it to become. It wasn't fully that yet. We know, of course, FDR tried to, or he actually confiscated gold. So he was already intent on moving away from a hard money standard and moving into some sort of weird, probably proto social credit type of system, because the socialists usually had that idea about in the future we can have this sort of fictional, fantastical type of monetary system, not based in reality. So I'm rambling, but long story short, I think that the real power behind all that was actually the banking power, and the banking power, eventually did achieve the ability to have it not linked to anything hard after, Nixon and that period not being linked to gold. So then we sort of got this infinite money machine, the infinite money printer, and that's always been the banker goal. If you read Tragedy and Hope, which is a book that we've lectured through for many years, the first 200 pages, Quigley says that this is Bill Clinton's mentor. He's not a conspiracy theorist. He's an apologist for the Western, technocratic banking system. He says at the beginning that the bankers figured this out in medieval Europe, that you could use gold notes and loan out more money based on these infinitely imprinted notes than you actually had in your reserves. And so you can then buy up money with interest, or buy up property and assets with the interest that you're making on just made up money. So it's a pretty wild scam. And that's what I think ultimately that all seeing eye on the dollar is about.
And I've heard you say that you think that money really is like the locus of control, right? Many things, culture is just derivative of the money. And before we dive into Bitcoin and your journey in Bitcoin, tell us about what you think is like the spiritual dimension of money.
Well, that's a great question. In fact, we were just talking to Pajot, and we have a mutual friend, Neil, Jonathan Pajot. If you don't know, he's an icon carver and a YouTuber. And we had a really good conversation about Bitcoin the other day on a podcast. He's still kind of unsure about what it is and where to go with it. So I'm trying to kind of move him in the right direction. But, money is not evil in itself. A lot of people think that, the Bible says money is the root of evil. No, it says the love of money is the root of evil. So money is just really a symbolic form of how we transact value and how we store and understand value. And so you can understand it in many ways. It's a medium of exchange for how we store energy as well, like Michael Saylor's kind of engineering understanding of Bitcoin. And it's the same principle for money too. So it's symbolically transacting value. But also, money has to have certain qualities that, divisibility, fungibility, all that kind of stuff. It needs to be a hard asset, something that you can not infinitely, that has rarity, that has value. So all of those things go into what money is. Spiritually, though, money, I think, is not a bad thing. God is the author of reality. God's the creator. And if you go back to the idea of the gold standard, well, God's the creator of gold. And we find all throughout Scripture a lot of positive things said about gold. But the vice of, loving money too much or something like that can definitely be where it becomes a sin. But we have to understand that nothing is evil in itself. And so if mankind, using the gifts that he has, that God gave him, begins to work and perfect better systems of money, and we've already seen in history that if you go from, glass beads in Africa, or if you're using what's that rock that the islanders used at the beginning of Siphoning Nemesis, if you use those for a while, well, there's better forms of that, right? So then we moved to silver and gold, and we can work to make a better type of monetary system. And I think if we understand that, then maybe people have a better bridge to understanding that actually Bitcoin is spiritually correct, ethical money. And I've been making this argument for a while, because the more I saw that the actual monetary system that we have that's fiat is actually theft-based. Mm-hmm. If you understand that it's theft-based, and if you're, inclined against usury, I mean, the whole system is really a usurious type of system, then you would understand that, well, wouldn't it be more ethical and more spiritually accurate to have a type of money that is not theft-based or usury-based? And that's essentially what you would get with Bitcoin, even better than gold and silver. So that's why I think, to hit on the spiritual point, if you really understand that, then you would be forced to say, well, the fiat system is actually unethical, spiritually demonic. It's predatory, right? It feeds on, people's stealing people's savings, basically, is what inflation is. So that's why it's spiritually, ethically correct money.
And just diving into a little bit of your Bitcoin journey, you first found out about it in 2011. You were a huge Max Keiser fan, but you were also listening to Peter Schiff, and you sort of went with Peter Schiff in the early days while you could still stack it under $5 or so, right?
One of my biggest mistakes. And I also was a little too conspiratorial back in those days. And so you have really been paying attention, because I remember I would listen to Max Keiser's RT show, and I was, broke college student at the time. I think I was doing grad school in like 2011, 12. And I would listen to him talking about all this stuff. And I remember him mentioning Bitcoin. And then I spoke at a conference, and some dude was like, hey, dude, I will give you 2 Bitcoin right now if you get a wallet. I'll send it to you right now. That Bitcoin was like, I don't know, $50 at the time, or $100. And I was like, what are you talking about, a wallet, right? So I didn't click with me. I didn't get it. And everybody has this phase, right, where you're like, you're against it, you don't get it, and then it clicks, right? And it wasn't actually Max's shows that made it click. It was because I had a friend that I was arguing with, And he was trying to get me into Bitcoin around the same time because he liked Max Keiser and Alex Jones too. And Alex would have Max on, and Max would mention Bitcoin back then. And I was too conspiratorial. I thought anything tech related just has to de facto be kind of in the domain of, oh, the technocrats are going to control it. They're going to control us through that. And so my assumption was, as I see people today, like the assumption is this is centralized money that has backdoors, right? We saw this with the Epstein stuff, which was preposterous, right? People saying Epstein put backdoors into Bitcoin. Total nonsense. There's no backdoors in a public ledger. It's decentralized, so it doesn't make any sense. If there was backdoors, right, you have a public system of, people who would have noticed this already throughout the whole Bitcoin network, presumably. So, yeah, I think it was, what was the big catalyst? I think actually the catalyst was my buddy kept putting pressure on me. And then I was like, all right, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to disprove Bitcoin, right? So this is what everybody does this too, where they go and they're like, I'm going to find all the dirt and I'm going to show my buddy that you are duped. You're such a dummy, dude. I can't believe you're falling for this obvious scam. And so I remember reading a bunch of articles, and I remember at the time, even Mike Adams was anti-Bitcoin, and he had a bunch of podcasts against it. And so I wrote this big essay against Bitcoin and money and all that form of money. And eventually I was like, all of my predictions and thoughts about it, because I kind of bought into, Bitcoin's going to die next, it'll be a zero next year. It's a passing fad. Well, then I noticed like 2017, that summer, it was like, it went up to like 1800. There was like a bump sometime around early summer, and it went up to like 20. It went to 1800, and then maybe to like 2200, somewhere in there. And I was like, well, this is not really fitting with what I said last year that this was going to go to zero, right? So I thought, well, you know what? I'll try this out. And initially I was like, I'll try it out as like a bet, So I remember having to argue with my stupid ass bank because the bank was like, you can't buy that. And I'm like, yes, you can. I had to go back and forth with these boomers that you can buy Bitcoin. It's not illegal. And so I eventually started stacking Bitcoin, and that was when it went that year. I think the peak was 19,000, 20,000 before it, crashed again. And then everybody was like, oh, you should have sold it at 19,000, 20,000. You idiot. You could have got out. Because that was back when everybody thought, it's a thing you trade now, right? And you get in, you get out. Again, I still didn't understand the philosophy and the long-term vision. I was just looking at it like people think about stock trading and being a crypto trader. So I was still uneducated, but I was beginning to learn more. And then I think I had that phase where everybody does, where you do trading, you try to trade crypto, and I want to make money on all these trades. And I did that for several years. And then I realized that at a certain point, it was like, if I had just stacked Bitcoin, I would have actually been a little better off than had I been spending all of this ridiculous time trying to time the trades and trying to follow the market cycle and all this stuff. So everybody kind of goes through that cycle too. And then I moved back into being more of a, I really think that the purpose of this was to fix the monetary system. And, whatever all that other stuff is in terms of like, it's more like gambling. If you're going to do meme coins and if all that other stuff, tokenization, that's another thing. And if people want to gamble, they can gamble, but that's not what Bitcoin is. It's fixing the monetary system. And that's the key point here. And that's what kind of brought me back after making the same dumb mistakes that everybody else makes, where you think, I'm going to trade cryptos and make a bunch of money. And then I remember one trade, I lost one night because I was an idiot. I didn't really know what I was doing. I think I lost like $40,000 in one night on trades. And so that was back in 2018. But that taught me a big lesson. Like, okay, maybe I need to know what I'm doing before I start playing with all this money. And again, after you get burned a couple times, I didn't ever get burned again that bad, maybe 10,000 or something like that later on. But after you get burned a few times, you realize I should just stack the Bitcoin. Like, there's no better like proposition than just stacking the Bitcoin. Like, it's like playing the lottery with more money than you want to play the lottery with.
I wanted to briefly interrupt today's interview to give a big shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Buy or sell instantly. Send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. Withdraw straight to cold storage. Even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon, you'll pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and save for retirement, all without leaving the app. Download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com or tap the link in the description below. Use promo code Bitcoin News and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today. Secure your stack with Rhino Bitcoin and enjoy the rest of the video. And for people who don't know you from the Bitcoin audience, I think you're one of the best debaters out there on the internet, willing to take all comers.
Thanks. Appreciate that, man.
And so you have plenty of experience of debating people who, I mean, I've heard you debate people who are anti-Bitcoin, right? So what advice do you have for those Bitcoiners? It's our constant struggle to try to convince other people that, hey, this thing is legit. So just general debate tips that you have for getting people to understand Bitcoin. What do you have?
Oh man, you're really good at these questions, man. I like when people ask good questions and not softball kind of, questions that make me think. Yeah, I mean, so I think everybody usually kind of, you end up beginning this debate with family members and people around you, right? Because I remember in 2017, when I first started buying Bitcoin, I was talking to like mom and my dad, and I'm like, oh, this. And you start trying to explain it. You start trying to be a Bitcoin evangelist. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, this sounds like some sort of, is that World of Warcraft type of money? What are you talking about? Your video game stuff? They think it's like video game money. And I'm like, no, it's not like that. I mean, it's a little bit like that, but not exactly. But, so usually it's the same in my experience, because this debate has come up a lot in the last 10 years. It's almost always the same, like usually 4 or 5 objections, right? So I think most Bitcoiners are used to the usual 4 or 5 objections because people are just repeating the FUD that they heard in the news because they think that sounds kind of intellectual, right? So it's like if you repeat what Paul Krugman or Dan Pena or any of these idiots say, you think, oh yeah, well, see, I sound kind of smart because MSNBC said that this was the money of criminals and psychopaths and drug dealers. Well, the dollar is the top currency for criminals and organized crime, drug dealers, and assassins or what, like whoever's buying, paying to have somebody assassinate. That's all dollars, dude. And then they'll say, well, but this is a currency that the technocrats invented so I'm going to go through each one of these, right? The technocrats invented this currency because they want to control everybody's money and there's backdoors into it. It's a public ledger. There's no backdoors. And secondly, this is antithetical to the money system that they have and they've used. So for example, if you look at Saifuddin Amis's book, which we did a podcast on that on my channel a couple days ago, or a couple months ago, that whole book for the first 70% is the history of money and critiquing the classical errors in monetary policy. The only last 30% of it is actually about Bitcoin. So he needs to go through the history of money and explain that money itself has been oftentimes a fraud in history. And the dominant system of the last century post Bretton Woods has been the Keynesian economic system. And if you understand the Keynesian system, it's based on war, it's based on never-ending expansion of the monetary supply, all of these fallacies and dumb arguments, long story short, it's antithetical to every principle that underlies Keynesian economics. So why would the elites and the CIA and the NSA, who, by the way, if you go into the history of them, they actually come out of a Fabian socialist ideology. All of the early heads of the OSS and CIA, they're Fabian socialists. The idea of a centralized, monetary currency, an e-dollar, all of those old MIT NSA papers, that's not Bitcoin. So if you understand the nuance of the distinction there, why would they create the very thing that is the antidote to them? And you could say, well, maybe it's controlled opposition. Yeah, but they don't control that opposition. So that argument doesn't make any sense. If it was a central bank digital currency e-dollar, you could argue then, yes, it does make sense that that's what they would put out. And guess what? That is what they're putting out. Bilderberg just met this year, and or a couple weeks ago, and they said at Bilderberg, we got to get back to thinking about how to get a central bank digital currency out there. That's not Bitcoin. So that's the next argument that I think falls if you understand that. And I'm trying to think of the other, what's another one of the, it's not a thing. This is the favorite argument of the boomers. It's not even a thing. You've got Peter Schiff is still using this dumb argument, right? It's not even a thing. Well, hold on a second. Every boomer uses their banking app, and they don't actually go and transfer physical dollars to their wallet all the time from the bank, right? Boomers understand using a banking app and paying for things through wire transfers. Boomers understand stocks. Boomers understand things like Facebook is a company that's not a thing, right? You can't get a microscope and get the Facebook out of your phone, right? It's digital. It's, in a sense, abstract, but it still has value. And we understand this about digital things. Files, right? Files are not a thing, but they're digital. And so they're in some sense abstract and conceptual. So if you can understand that just not being a physical thing doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, that's a huge hurdle for people that just think of this as something kind of like ethereal and not real. And they also typically think of it as, it's a thing that they could just keep making more of it, right? One of the guys, I was supposed to go on this guy's podcast, and he's like a former, I think he's a Navy SEAL or something. His name's Chad something, but he went on Rogan, and then he's making these videos about Bitcoin and why it's not a thing. And it's like, he says, you don't actually know that they won't just create 1 million more Bitcoin, right? And it's like, no, you don't understand it's hardware. It's hardwired into Bitcoin to not be that. That's just the whole ethos and purpose of it. It's not, you can't just print 1 million more Bitcoin. So again, so many people have just basic bitch FUD information that they've heard, and that's what they're repeating. So knowing a few of these basic, and I'm not an expert on Bitcoin. I mean, I've been reading books and studying it, but I still feel like, especially if I'm in the context of people who are very tech savvy, like I'm still kind of a goober boomer. I'm still trying to learn. So, but I think most of the refutations are pretty low tier.
Absolutely. And another one you hear is that it's made by this mysterious guy, Satoshi. We don't know who he is. And we've seen a bunch of...
Yeah, exactly. I got the shirt right here.
We've seen a bunch of...
It's made by me. I'm actually Satoshi. So I'm coming out right now telling you guys that it's me.
This guy. Yeah, so we've seen New York Times just put out an article saying there was Adam Back. The new documentary just came out saying that it was Len Sassaman and Hal Finney. How much weight do you put into the mysterious origins of Bitcoin, and how important is it that it stays mysterious?
I've always thought Max Keiser had a good point about that, which is that it makes sense actually for it to be anonymous, because if it wasn't anonymous, there's a lot more problems that would come from that, right? The person would be dissected into oblivion. Everything about him would be brought forward, and that would be a means perhaps of discrediting it, right? So for example, let's say there was something bad in the past of one of the creators or the creator. That would then be leveraged as a means. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, like, as an example, that could then be leveraged against the system itself as if, right? So it could be like an ad hominem. That could be, but also, it speaks, I think, to the genius of it to have it anonymous, because it kind of goes along with the ethos of Bitcoin. Not that Bitcoin is totally anonymous; it's semi-private, but it's pseudonymous rather than anonymous. But for Bitcoin's founder to be pseudonymous also, I think, makes sense. And I've looked at those documentaries and those speculations, and it always ends up being unknown. The trails never really go anywhere, so I have no idea who it is. But no, I think it is actually a feature, not a bug, that we don't know the creator, because it would be a lot more it would add a lot more potential FUD.
Yes,
were we to know.
Yes, there's no CEO to.
But that's actually a good. What do you think about that? Do you think that it's a plus, or do you think that it's a
it's a huge criticism? It's a huge plus. Yeah, there's nobody to throw in jail, especially in the early days. It would have been a very easy way.
That's an obvious one. I forgot the obvious one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in the
they would have assassinated right immediately, like whoever was behind this.
Yeah, and he stepped away in 2011, and the project has grown on its own, which is absolutely amazing to see, right? And now it's worth over $1 trillion, of course, and as the most influential people in the world talking about it. And your expertise is about outlining the coming technocracy if it's not already here. And we saw novels in the past, whether it's 1984 or Brave New World, outline what they thought the future was going to look like. And now we're sort of in that world. And it's less 1984, and you say it's more Brave New World. People are being suckered into this control system through convenience. And I think another thing we need to hit on is screen time, screen addiction. And I mean, I'm guilty of it of myself. As you are an internet creator, we spend a lot of time looking at screens, whether they're in our hands or in front of us. How does that play into it? And how far are we into the establishment of a full technocracy control grid around us?
Yeah, great question. Usually what we do on my channel is we go through the writings of the elite, as I call it. So we read the books from these internationalist goblin people. We read Klaus Schwab, we read H.G. Wells, we read all these technocrats to see. Jacques Attali is another big one. And in a lot of the books, they will have these sort of actuaries about where they want to be in certain decades. So they have like goals for 2030, 2040, 2050. And I would say that in many ways, they're pretty advanced in terms of, the rollout of AI and all that seems to be on time. But there's other areas where they're not on the ball. And I think they will even admit this at times. You do have a pretty significant reaction, post COVID to a lot of the moves of technocratic control, such as tracking and tracing, the systems that they wanted to set up in terms of, vaccination controls globally, just really crazy stuff. And I think they kind of were damaged from a lot of that. There were several setbacks. So in areas in terms of even infrastructure, the infrastructure is not actually there everywhere in the world to have a global technocracy per se. So I think they focus definitely on, West and Western civilization in terms of really getting things in place. But we've not really seen a total move towards, giant smart cities yet. That's things that are in the plans. And I'm not saying that it's inherently wrong to have something like an advanced smart city, but what these people usually want for the smart city is rationing, or, the 15-minute cities, or the C initiatives that they had last year, where they were saying, we want these cities that have rationing for, you don't get meat and dairy, that's banned. You got to eat bugs, like all that stuff they were pushing even last year. That I think is not as far along as they would like. So usually what they do is they sort of capitalize on crises to further that agenda, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think they would need many more crises to really get advanced. But here's the thing, like, even if they're not where they want to be in some of the areas, they are going to keep pushing, right? So they're not going to stop. This is a long-term plan that's been there for a century or more, and they're not going to give up or just quit. They will keep pushing, because I believe ultimately there's sort of a spiritual darkness that pushes and promotes that sort of enslavement mentality that they have, and they're committed to it. So yeah, I think the good news is that there is more and more pushback. Various reasons for that. Obviously, there's a lot more freedom on Twitter and even YouTube, more so than there were a few years ago. I can tell you that. But at the same time, like when they met at Bilderberg last week or the week before, nobody was there protesting it. There was like two people there, Dan Dixon, one other guy. Alex talked about it. Berman's talked about it. Pretty much nobody else talked about it. And the entire agenda of Bilderberg was the technocracy. And here you have the top, political and corporate class colluding together at semi-secret meetings every year, saying we want to bring all this technocracy in. Where are we at? It's like a Spectre meeting, right? In James Bond Spectre. So that's where it's at. And they may be a little bit behind, but they're going to keep pushing. And by the way, Trump will go away and this agenda will continue. So a lot of people, I think, were distracted thinking, oh, well, everything's cool. We got Trump now. We don't have to worry about it. Well, Trump's going to be gone, and then it's going to go right back towards the push for the technocratic agenda. In fact, some of Trump's policies are even pushing it.
Yeah, it's still continuing under Trump. It really doesn't matter who's sitting there in that office.
Exactly.
This is marching forward. And I must say that I think that you did some of the best coverage on the internet when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. When all the files came out a couple of months ago, you were on top of it on a daily basis, going on live stream and talking about what you found. And you went deep, and this stuff is kind of scary. right? And his connections to world leaders, industry, everybody, it was way deeper than we even imagined. So what are some of your top findings from Epstein, and also address the Bitcoin stuff, as you mentioned before?
I think the key issue was that, Epstein was throwing money at everything, right? So he was throwing money into genetics. We just did a big podcast last night on that'll be on my channel today about his role in transhumanist funding projects, genetic projects, because a lot of people overlooked all that too, like what exactly was going on with Zorro Ranch. So we went pretty deep into that last night. But he would throw money at everything. So the idea that because he put money into early Bitcoin Foundation stuff or other crypto projects, right? The idea that he controls them or creates them is preposterous, right? That's like saying that, venture capital investors, that throw their money at, 20 different startups. Oh, they control them and there's backdoors in all of them, right? Everybody uses email. I'm sure that DARPA and the Pentagon had some role in the creation of email or something, but we're not going to not use email because, the Pentagon had some role in that. But, so I think that with Epstein, you had, basically they would throw their net to try to cast anybody and anything, right? So whether it's Peter Thiel or whether it's trying to get Elon to the island or whether it's trying to get, people in Hollywood, they would try to get anybody. And then they would also try to get anything, get their foot in the door for anything. So it's just kind of silly to think that the whole thing was like him controlling or programming Bitcoin or something like that. And then, of course, one of those emails was actually obviously fake, where he's saying that he created Bitcoin together with, Ghislaine or whatever. That was obviously a fake email. So that's just silly. But the dark part of it, though, that I think is relevant here is that it's a window into the international monetary system as an actual organized crime syndicate. That's the key thing here. And understanding that the highest levels of banking and corporate interests are working on, for example, separate intelligence, advanced intelligence to invest. So they invest based on insider information and intelligence, and everybody else invests on, normie boomer news shows, right? They don't have the inside track. So it's a gamed rigged system from the outset. Epstein pushed for all of these other things that are antithetical to Bitcoin, all these other crypto projects that he had an interest in. So he wasn't involved in the ethos of Bitcoin in the sense of freedom and, controlling your own money and having a sovereignty. He obviously didn't believe in any of that. So it's not like he was part of the Bitcoin philosophy or ethos. He's a transhumanist. He is a money launderer. He's a organized crime figure. He is a blackmailer. I mean, he's all intelligence agent. That's what this is. But again, the way that he's interacting with the Rothschilds is indicative of the exact same model of the Rothschild banking system and control. If you rewind 100, 200 years ago, they were saying the exact same things about advanced intelligence at Waterloo, which allowed them to buy up the London Stock Exchange. So it's a game rigged system. That's why Bitcoin is a life raft out of this game rigged system.
Well, Jay, I know you got to run. It's a worthy excuse. You're going to Alex Jones' show. So we got so much more to talk about. Got to have you back on.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime. I'm so sorry I was hard to nail down. It's just been crazy lately. But please, I love talking about this. I'll come back anytime.
Cheers, man. All right, I'll let you go. But check out Jay Dyer on YouTube and X, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you could drop a like and a share, it would help in our mission to accelerate adoption. If you're looking for more Bitcoin signal, join over 10,000 readers of our newsletter, Bitcoin News Weekly. Every Monday morning, we send out the biggest headlines of Bitcoin to keep you in the know in under 5 minutes. Links below in the description. Then come hang with us live every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We break it all down live on stream with a new guest, and you can add your 2 sats in the chat. See you next week.